So, why, Holly, are you doing the work that you're doing? Why did you start BYkids? And maybe, in your own words, why don't you talk about what BYkids does?
Well, first of all, thank you guys all for being here. Somebody in the back raise their hand if they can't hear us well. Rebecca's done an amazing job as an intern and getting a whole lot of people out for this and getting excited, framing it very beautifully. Want to do a shout out to my favorite niece, Jamie Baum, back here, and the one in the room who's not an intern but should be, Emmy Heyman, who's done a great job. There you are. And two next summer interns sitting back here, Ruby and Jana. And thank you all for being here. This is really hallowed ground for me to be back at Colorado College showing our film. So to answer your question, I, at my heart, am an educator and a social activist. And as I left Colorado College, you know, I had a big choice to make. My guidance counselor told me if you wanted a big school, you went to Harvard. If you wanted a small school, you went to Williams. I'm like, I'm looking at the Barron's book, which is the way we used to do it in the old days. There are a lot of colleges in this country, and I found this amazing place in Colorado that had been liberal arts from the beginning, co-ed from the beginning, liberal arts, and I told my guidance counselor I was coming here. And what, for those of you in the CC community and a few of you who can observe it from close distance, the thing that this place does is allow people to take risk. So my career, once I graduated, the other big decision was, do I go to work as a river guide for Outward Bound? Or do I take, and I'm not joking, or do I take the job working in the writing program at the New York Times, which is as close to Jayshree's bonded slavery as you and I will ever get, I hope. I took the job at the New York Times knowing that if I said no to them, I would never get that opportunity again. And what I saw to be kept within these walls, I don't think there are any former New York Times or moles, I saw what I call white man colonial journalism every day. And I didn't like it all that much. I was like, you know, the stories that get put on the front page of the New York Times are not necessarily that important and are not being told in an authentic way. So put all this together, fast forward a little bit. I went to work at the New York Times doing print journalism. I like to say I was so prescient about the downfall of print journalism that I knew that documentary film really was the future. It just got me more excited. I think film is just way cooler than reading. Don't know. I then had my own kids and it came down to an experience where I'd come home from a dinner party. I live in New York, and we'd been with 20 Pulitzer Prize winning journalists. And they were all driven by ego and politics. And I got home to my relatively young kids to talk about the day, and I was more impressed with the way my own children saw the world, not that they're brilliant, but that they're honest, that the way they see the world and report on it was authentic. So we've got white man colonial journalism at work wanting to overthrow that. We've got kids are better storytellers than anybody. And we've got the fact that I really feel very strongly about educating people, and that global issues for a number of economic and political reasons have frighteningly fallen off our radar, so that we hear a lot about what happens in our backyard, but we are playing policeman to Iraq and Syria and all these other countries, but we don't know all that much about it. So put that all in the, whatever you call that, shaker thing, shake it up, and out came BYkids. And it, you know, Rebecca's heard this story too many times. We really didn't know what we would have in this, that I went through Colorado College and nobody ever taught me that you had to have a mentor. But if it hadn't been for one class I took with Tom Cronin, when at the end of the class he said, everybody needs a mentor, and if you need one, I'm first online. I've collected mentors, most of them older than me, some of them younger than me. A lot of them younger than me, actually. And so mentoring I see as something, it's a lost art in our culture, right? That Joyce can go to India, not speaking a word of this native language. Jayshree, who's never picked up a camera, can be so inspired to literally have the microphone. Her community can be so empowered that they're being listened to, and our big joke is it's the one time the Americans show up to shoot and they don't have a gun. And so the conversation that evolves in the 1 month that Joyce is in India with Jayshree and able to really do guerrilla diplomacy, that's the magic. So long-winded way of saying that's what inspired me. And it's working. It's really working. And I hope you enjoyed what she had to say, because I tell you, we got off, she's never left a 2-hour radius of this town. And part of our model is that we raise enough money to bring each of the kid filmmakers to their big festival premiere. Because why would you make a film and not want to be on the red carpet, right? So we put that one in. I mean, she's thrilled that American kids are seeing this, but the red carpet was appealing. Well, the first really big film festival to invite her was the Doha Film Festival in Qatar, richest country by some calculation that I don't quite understand. Invited her. She had a first-class ticket with somebody in the film who she left India for the first time, and there was a chauffeur limousine waiting for her to take her to the 5-star hotel. I'm like, God, I wanted a film from her head. You know what? All she could say is, I'm just delighted that a new group of people will be able to hear my story. And that's the way it rolls with her. And we've done 5 films. She was the 3rd. So that's my answer.
How did you decide to do a film in India, in this particular part of India, and around education? How did that come into fruition?
Yeah, good question. So we like to say we have real systems in place for this. So we've got a story selection committee. The board and I come up with themes. So we work from theory down to practice. And in this case, on our list of themes was access to education for girls in the developing world. And I don't know how much of down and dirty storytelling you like to hear, but we had a film, literally the plane tickets were bought in Jordan, where we'd found a girl who, actually a CC connection, so I better not badmouth the story evolution on this one too much. Anyway, the story, right at the last minute, I had Joyce, the mentor, call our potential filmmaker, because they hadn't had one-on-one. And the story was that this girl had fought her parents to be educated. And Joyce called her and got her on the phone and said, Holly really wants to know the story of when you were telling your parents that no, you were going to buck the system and actually go to college. Girl's like, come from a really rich family. All girls go to college. Joyce's like, oh. She calls me and goes, what do we do? I go, well, cancel your plane ticket. So now we were literally back to square one, knowing that we wanted to do a film about education. But the universe works in fabulous ways, and Joyce was at a dinner party, because New York dinner parties can be very educational, and somebody told her a story that there are 80 million people in India kept, as you may or may not have understood, we all learned that they're the Brahmins, they're the untouchables, and these 80 million people who never got the memo that bonded slavery was made illegal because they don't read, are still bonded slaves. And Joyce, this could not possibly be. She called me from the dinner party. Could you Google it? Well, you Google it, and guess what? It's true. So we had our new film, and 2 weeks later, Joyce left for this. And the mentors are all fabulous in their own way, but Joyce, at the age of 75, moved into the residential school with Jayshree and her classmates for the month and had quite a remarkable experience.
What's interesting about Joyce also is that she was like a force in the documentary world, and one of the first female verite documentarians. And so there's somewhat of a parallel in terms of women's empowerment in both of their stories. And I personally was taken by this film and this story just because it's a really interesting way of thinking about the BYkids model, because what BYkids does is implement or tries to implement change in Western classrooms in order to encourage films to act as conduits for understanding globally. And so it was like a two-tiered education story by the teller and the receiver. So that I really appreciated about this.
Double whammy.
Yeah. So what do you think? Why do you think that having film in classrooms and having young people connect through film is important?
Oh, okay. So who here doesn't have a phone that has moving image on it? Even the non-students of us, right? So the world has literally been revolutionized by technology. Okay? That we can all agree on. The teaching industry, as far as I have experienced, has not kept up with that kind of revolution. So when I go to places like the Graduate School of Education at UPenn or Teachers College at Columbia, teachers are frankly terrified of film. We had a little conversation earlier tonight. It's not true of everybody, but film is still seen as the babysitter. Remember that thing we used to see, the black and white thing that Jiminy Cricket came and taught you not to smoke, and that was educational, but there's really a bias against film in many classrooms, so that teachers are reluctant to incorporate them. My premise is that until we come to kids in a language, meaning moving image, in a language that they understand and that they relate to, as a way to bring them in information, and that concurrently you're asking them to express themselves through moving image, meaning tell your own story, explore your own world through moving image, and we're keeping it only to textbooks and written word, we're doomed. So get on with it, guys, already. And the more I think, we're hearing a lot about the Khan Academy and the flipping of the classroom. Learning happened. I mean, we were in the dark for 27 minutes, right? And if you didn't cry when Jayshree says that her mother died, or that you are moved beyond repair, that you'll never forget at what a hero that father is, and if you don't get it here, then that's what education is to me. So the more we can have these community experiences and be exposed to things in a visceral way, I think education might actually have a hope of not being called a crisis anymore.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm opening it up to the audience. Anyone have questions? Yes.
So as someone who really does love film in the classroom, and really do, can a public school teacher go to this website and access the film for their classroom?
So if, as half the public schools in America have access to Discovery Education by paying a yearly fee for the full library, you will have free access. If you don't have that, you should call Discovery and get it. And if your administrators don't have that, you can buy 3 of the 5 films that we've done on Amazon. And if you have trouble with any of that, you're going to email me and we'll figure it out.
Amazon too. We should have it on streaming on Amazon.
Yeah, we should. You didn't get to that this summer, Rebecca. You got to come back next summer.
Yeah.
Since this film was made, what changes have occurred in the village?
Yeah, great question. So having spent a week with Jayshree, first of all, she became, which doesn't always happen to our filmmakers, they become heroes here, but they don't always become literal rock stars. I mean, she said, Holly, I am a rock star in my village. So she became the storyteller of all the things that are happening for tribal girls, and around the boys are being affected too. She has been in the newspaper. Google her when you get home. She's got more coverage there than she gets here. Vivek, who is a real social activist and has continued on in local politics, has managed to build, I think, 10 schools where you understood that other school with the drunk English teacher is what the tribals would have if it weren't for people like Vivek, and he's just kept at it. So, you know, there are 80 million people to affect, and there are just as many families who are not brave enough to have their kids not take care of the siblings who are still. So there's a long way to go, but there's literally a sea change in how the larger community of India and the government at a higher level is looking at these issues. Because it's a human rights issue, right? It's pretty clear, and that's a lot of people to be affected.
Can I ask a question?
Yes?
I'm going to ask it loud, even though,
Great.
just so that I can hear. Well, I was just wondering, because you were talking about when you were finding her story, that you kind of go like from theory to practice. And so like finding a particular story that can like highlight like access to education kind of issues. And then in the film, there were like a lot of parts are of somebody asking her questions and answering, and her answering that on screen. So I was kind of wondering how you see, or like to what extent you feel like these kids are telling their stories versus like your organization telling them.
It's actually a great question. Did you all hear that?
No.
So, to what extent is the child really telling their story, right? So, I'm a purist, okay? So, my idea with film is that if you're saying it's by kids, it really has to be. Tell a little bit of a background story on that. In the very beginning, when we were conceiving of this, I said the kid has to edit the film. It's by a kid, right? Well, my board is filled with a bunch of really talented filmmakers. Like, Martin Scorsese does not edit his own film. He hires somebody to do it. So, we've done 5 films. The first one was in Mozambique with 2 film mentors. And while they were in Mozambique making this film with an AIDS orphan, we were on the phone an awful lot. And they're like, how do you feel about Alcides, in this case, the 17-year-old boy who lost both parents to AIDS, giving somebody else the camera when he wants to? And I thought about it. I'm like, no, because if you're in the audience and you feel ever like, you know, I'm talking about white man journalism, that it feels like BYkids swooped in and took your story, it's not sincere and authentic. So, let me think about that. And then Neil Baer, he's actually a CC grad too, and why I know him, executive produced Law & Order SVU. I took a moment, and he said, look, the reality is we're having each of these kids serve as the director. And if, in this case, when Jayshree makes the choice to go with Vivek to the other school, there was a lot of, Joyce is like, no, I'm a purist too, and you've got to hold the camera. And Jayshree's like, no, because if I'm holding the camera, I'm not actually able to see through all people's eyes what's happening. It's only through the camera, through my eyes. And so she made she's a good director, right? She tells her dad, go sit down. Joyce had no weight with this conversation. She said, okay, we're gonna give you directorial privilege. No film, as we've learned, is made with one camera. Okay, so anybody in the film business, you need B-roll, you need a cutaway, you need when the guy burps or drools in an interview, you need a way to not have that. So there's got to be something else to look at. So there's always another camera at work, and it's given us the ability, I hope, to have this feel genuinely like it is. She directed this at every moment, as have each of the 5 films. And you get the sense of that, I hope. I hope
how did editing work?
Editing works in New York, the mentor is put in charge of editing. The child is part of, 80 different iterations of each film, and does film notes on each iteration. And technology can be scoochy. Like in India, they don't actually have computer access, so we had to send the film to Jayshree. She had to watch it on the one computer at school and have her notes taken in the local dialect, translated and sent back to Joyce. Like, I'm gonna die before this film is over. I'm like, don't. So basically it's the kid directing, narrating. So each one of the films has the child write the script and record their voice. and the cinematographer. And the producer then is the film mentor who oversees the editing. So the point is the kids should learn how to edit.
Okay.
Yes?
Could you tell us a little bit about all 5 of your films?
Sure. So number 1 was the film in Mozambique done by a boy who lost both parents to AIDS. It, to me, is really, I'm like, people say, oh, your films are so depressing. You know, AIDS is definitely a big, sad theme, right? So we wanted to deal with the ravages of AIDS, but Alcides tells this amazing story of how resilient human beings are and how in his case, you can all go see the film from Amazon. He recreated a family with this old woman who he'd known for 3 months before he made this film, and they are so beautiful together. And it really is it's about the human spirit and perseverance. And when I describe it with a one line, it's about how we define family. So that's number 1. The second one was done by the would-be king of Tibet. So had Tibet not been invaded by China and the government in exile not chosen to be a democracy, this boy who made our film would be the king. And that's a whole night. That's a good one. We've actually brought that film to Colorado College. But that film thematically was about cultural preservation. It's about, he was born and raised in exile. It's about what it means to have a home that you may never get to go to. It's about having this really untenable level of responsibility that most kids at 12 are not literally saddled with. Treachen was here 2 years ago. We were lucky to share it here. Number 3 was this one. And number 4, we wanted to find a film about displacement. It was right when George Clooney was going to Darfur, and one of my board members is Colombian and said, between us and the 4 walls, I'm not that smart. I thought I read the newspaper, but he at the board meeting said, so displacement, Colombia is the 2nd largest displaced population in the world. I'm like, Colombia, really? And Colombia is a tiny little country. He's like, oh, no, it's not. It's huge. And the Colombian displacement problem is caused by, guess what? The drug trade. And guess who drives the drug trade? Not just Colorado College students, but a whole lot of Americans and a whole lot of Europeans. And my board member's point was, wouldn't it be nice to have a film that's not about some really abstract foreign thing, but something that we're actually causing? And then our last one was our first American film. It was done by a young girl who came when she was 10 from Yemen, moved to Brooklyn, wore a headscarf, dealt with unrelenting bullying, Islamophobia. And amazingly, it's a film because you meet her family and her father, like this dad, right? Her dad is such a hero. Everything they gave up to move to this country. And Faiza rivets. We've traveled around the country with her film, and she's like an urban rapper, and she's still wearing her headscarf and her Converse sneakers, and she rocks everybody. So that one's really about bullying and immigration. So, and then, as Rebecca says, we're very excited about the PBS series. It's season 1 is all 5 of those films. October premiere, so keep your eye out. Tell all your friends to watch. And remarkably, PBS never says, we'll help you fundraise. They usually say, do you have viewers like you to help pay for all this? And over the summer, we went and met with them, and they're now helping us fundraise for season 2 and beyond. So we've started something big. So thank you for being part of it.
I'm a high school teacher at a local high school here, and I was wondering if you had resources for students who don't have CC connections and might want to be involved in the filmmaking process.
Yeah, there. So for your students, ways for them to be making films of their own. Yeah, why don't? I'll do a particular shout out to something that the Film Society of San Francisco has done as roadmap for making film, using film. It's literally the best thing ever made. And if you go on their website, you can easily find it. We've got school guides that we make for each of our films. So if you go on the BYkids.org website, they're but much more specific to our films. Their film, I'm sure that there are film programs, and you've got an iPhone or some kind of, pick it up and start trying to tell a story. Because that's you know, you can go to film school, but don't. Just don't. Just start telling stories and find stories that move you, and that will inherently move other people. So, but I'm happy to be in touch with you and give you, so there are a lot of resources out there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming, guys.
I have two questions, but I'd like to start with the first one, and that is that inherently in this movie, what I see is that as you've brought about this community of uneducated slaves brought forward into a new culture, that one of the bigger problems is one of daycare, is that getting a child to school means they have to give up or somebody in the family has to take over. Has there ever been a thought that to change a community like that, and I'm not talking about daycare for 80 million, but or 70 million and 10 million go to school, but what social impact that could have, that if there was a way for children to be watched while their parents are working, then therefore the other children who are of school age could be able to attend these schools and not make quite the sacrifice that it appears that they're having to do now.
Well, let's get that suggestion to Vivek tonight. I will email him and I'll get an answer for you and get a spark lit if they're not doing it already. It's kind of obvious.
Yes.
But obviously the problem.
So how large is this community that they're in?
In
I
this
mean, 80
particular
million,
village?
yeah.
So most of the tribals live, if you know India at all, in the Maharashtra state, which is the most populated of India. But the part of the problem with tribals is that I think there are 122 different languages spoken. So it's not a unified group that we can, there's not one fix for all of them, and they're certainly not all in this particular state. But the 80 million, I think the statistic is 80% of the 80 million live in that one state, but the one state is ginormous.
And then I have another question, and that is, I'm on a founding board for an entrepreneurial high school here in the Springs.
Cool.
Thumbs up. But what I see is a question about what are the dynamics financially of starting this kind of a business thing? What does it cost, or what are the long list of your partnerships having to donate in order to either make a film that tells this story or to make a school that educates the 30 or 50 kids that seem to be going there?
The school business I know nothing about. I know that, you know, if I go to fundraisers in New York, they talk about $1 million. In this case, having spent time with the woman who does fundraising for the school, I actually do know. It costs $20,000 to build the school, one school for 70 girls, and run it for the year. So in Doha, thankfully, a whole group of local businessmen who came from this exact area showed up and wrote a big old check. I can talk much more deeply about what it costs to make a film like this. We are very scrappy. A film can cost, if we paid for everything, which we never do, they cost $140,000-ish, depending on how far away and how complicated. As I say, we have had incredible good fortune. The Ford Foundation came in as a founding funder. We've got 500 incredibly generous donors, from family foundations all over the world to my 8-year-old nephew, who gives me, every time the Tooth Fairy comes, he gives BYkids the money. And it really matters. It really matters. So we've to date raised $1 million and made 5 films that will be a PBS series. My Hollywood friends can't really believe that. They're like, doesn't your office cost that much? And Rebecca's been in my office and knows it doesn't. So that's, you know, honestly, the films have cost from nothing because some of the film mentors have been so moved by the power of this that they've paid for it on their own dime, which are the best mentors to have. Well, not really. They're one kind. So nothing more like $40,000 to $50,000 to $60,000.
Thank you for that insight. That's really, I think, a frame for me to be able to go forward with.
Yeah, and again, happy to talk to you more. Yes?
By capturing these human stories and sharing it with others, what would you say is your greatest takeaway, and what would be the one thing you would want your audience to take away?
I think that we all have this craving to be empathetic, right? Like we actually all want to connect to each other, and we live in a world that often is at odds with that, and this ability to connect person to person through storytelling. You know, I always say that, you know, we were cavemen sitting around a campfire sharing stories, and we haven't evolved out of that. That's in our DNA. So the more that we can do that and see across the aisle and across, you know, Jayshree was able to be in the room with us, and you therefore have a much deeper compassion for not just her, for probably be like you leave here and say, kids have a voice. They have a story. So I would say my takeaway is how deeply we want to be empathetic, and given that, I mean, this is a tiny little opportunity, right? People just eat it up, of all ages. And I would end only by saying that I met not so long ago the head of UN peacekeeping at the UN. And he overheard what I was describing about BYkids to somebody who I wasn't connecting with very well. And he said, you know what, I'd like to help you. I said, oh, I didn't get a chance to meet you. Edmund Moulet, I run peacekeeping for the UN, and I'm never starstruck. I almost passed out. And he boils it down to this. He's a very dear friend now. He says, if you can have Jayshree and one kid make friends with each other, they will never kill each other. So if you do this enough, war goes away. You're going to make my job really easy. I quote him. I can't quote that myself.
A question about Jayshree's process as director. Did this film just happen as it happened? Or was there any storyboarding or narrative arc, pre-planning? Or was it just a month in the life?
So it was a month. So Joyce, here's what I tell them, because I know how art works. You can't, if you write it down, the art's over, right? So we had a profile of, I think in this case, 15 kids from this particular school from which we might choose a filmmaker. And what I know, because part of this as executive producer is raising the money and then being willing to jump off a cliff, like blindfold on, just jump. And what I've learned to do is say to the mentor, we've narrowed it down from 15 to 5. And in this case, Jayshree had stars. Both Joyce and I read the profiles and had stars by her name. You know why? Because she had missed 3 years of school and was now considered the top of her class. We're like, how's that not cool? But as I say to Joyce, who knows filmmaking way better than me, the magic happens in the room. And if this girl doesn't have the capacity to actually be what Neil has taught me is the definition of a director, which is be able to boss people around with a smile on their face, it won't work. And there's got to be chemistry between Joyce and whoever we chose. And there's got to be a willingness to be able to be open enough, and a family that supports. I mean, there are like a lot of things that have to gel to make the magic happen like this. So I gave Joyce the new, right? We cashed in the ticket to Jordan, and now we had a new ticket to India, and I said, go. And take as many days as you need to be in the group of the 5 kids that we've narrowed it down to. And if one of those 5 doesn't have the magic, find another one. Jayshree had it. Joyce emailed me that first night and said, oh, we picked the winner, all right. And this kid, I mean, I was shocked at how tiny she is. She's minuscule. Like when I got to Doha, I'm literally twice her size. And I went to hug her and she almost broke, and I was a little nervous, but man, she just takes over a room. It's remarkable. And I think that's part of the magic of being a film director.
So it's kind of character driven.
It's very character driven. You know, it's theme, like theme is all intellectual, right? But at the end of the day, if we're doing a theme that is not, if the fairy dust isn't there, we'll pick another theme.
So
Thank you.
officially time is up. So anyone who has somewhere to go is free to go. But Holly generously offered to stay around if people have more questions.
And I think you're bribing people with free pizza, right?
Yeah.
So that maybe we'll just.